Good morning, Mark chapter 10. We have disposable cups, don't we? They make life easy. We have disposable razors. I don't know if anybody who shaves with the old-fashioned ones, I wouldn't know how to. But do we have disposable people? Do we kind of use people and then get rid of them when we don't want them anymore? Well, to be honest, we do. In our country, in our culture, we've made people disposable. It's a human tendency, like you see it, don't you? Like while a friendship's working, we're all for it, and then it doesn't take much. Sometimes you see it, like the high school girls, it doesn't take much and we're not friends anymore because I was getting nothing out of it. We're a little bit about ourselves. We're a little bit selfish, aren't we? But our country is moving towards endorsing that and accepting that and making it just the way things are. Let me give you an example. Just this year, when the coronavirus hit us, we went into lockdown, and what we were told is we're going to lock down because we don't want to lose any of the vulnerable people. That's particularly old people. We don't want to cause the death of someone, a loved family member, an older person, a vulnerable person. But did you know that this year, before the coronavirus hit, the New South Wales government was debating a euthanasia bill, making it easier for people to get rid of their parents. Mum's really sick and you sit down and have a conversation with mum. Mum, you really don't want to go through this indignity, do you? You don't want to suffer and like you've got no control. Wouldn't it be better if you just kind of made your own decision? And plus it's going to cost $1 million and your inheritance is only 1.5. That only leaves $500,000 for us. It's just such a bad idea to put the decision about whether mum lives or dies in the hands of the people who are going to inherit. It's just so dumb. We've seen it hasn't worked in other countries and we're still thinking about it here. I'll give you another example. Very recently, was it last year or the year before, the New South Wales government made it legal to have an abortion. Before that it was technically illegal. No one ever enforced it. It was technically illegal to have an abortion just because it was inconvenient to carry that baby to term. But now it's legal. You don't need a reason. So if you're from one of those ethnic cultures and you get an ultrasound and it's a girl and you don't want a girl, you go and say, I don't want to have this baby. I can't afford it, or it's just inconvenient timing for us. Whatever you say, they can't ask. A baby's life has value only if you want that baby. If you want that person, they're a person and they have rights. If you don't want that person, they're not a person and you can kill them. It's been like that with marriage since the 70s. No-fault divorce came in. Whereas you don't even need a reason anymore, just do it. If you don't want to be with that person, don't be with that person. And it sounds free and it sounds kind of like wonderful in terms of, we don't want people to be in miserable marriages and all that, but it's actually not. It's just selfishness. It's just me about me. And if you don't give me what I want anymore, I'll find someone else. And it's a trap that leads us just to unhappy lives. Let's see what Jesus says about that. Jesus says, when they come and test him, and you've got to notice that they're trying to test him. This is not an honest question from the Pharisees, but they're trying to test him. Maybe it was a hot button issue, today you can suss someone out pretty quickly by asking them about evolution or about women in ministry or whatever. It's kind of like there's sides in a debate almost. And so maybe that's what this issue was back then. Certainly divorce has been abused by people all through the ages, and it's always something that people are debating about because it's so damaging to so many people. But Jesus says, what did Moses say? What does the Old Testament say? What dispensation did Moses give you in the Old Testament? And they say he permitted us to divorce. But what Jesus said is really interesting. He said it's because of the hardness of your hearts. Because of your hardness of heart. Now Jesus might mean two things. He might mean our hardness of heart towards God. That is, God gives us a law and we're not going to listen to him because it's too hard to do. We don't want it. Or he might mean our hardness of heart towards each other. Husbands and wives get hard-hearted towards each other, and that's where divorce is. He could have meant either of those things, but I think the two go together, since God asks us to be faithful, to be loving, to give. When we don't do that, there's obviously a hard-heartedness to God as well in that. I think it's both. Because, I don't know, I've been a pastor for a while now and I've seen it. Whenever someone gets a divorce, there's a hard heart there. Sometimes two hard hearts, but at least one. Whenever someone has an affair, there's a hard heart. You've let yourself grow cold. You've let yourself grow bitter. You've started to think about fulfillment somewhere else, and then you pursue that. There's a hard-heartedness towards that person. When people say, oh, we're just not compatible, no, what it is you've let your marriage grow cold and hard. One of you at least is hard-hearted. And when God says don't be like that and you keep doing that over years, you're hard-hearted to him as well. There's a really good article, I'm going to put it in a link right under this sermon, about, I think it's 11 or 12 steps to an affair. It doesn't just happen overnight for most people. For most people, what it is you let yourself grow cold, you let yourself drift off, you start to fan it. There's a steps there that you take. And we did this at Bible college, and I've done it every few years since then, is just to stop, look at this and ask yourself, where am I up to on this? Am I at stage 1 or stage 3 or stage 10? Where am I drifting down that track towards actually having an affair? Because it seems impossible at the moment that I would do that, but if you head in that direction, it happens, because nobody ever actually, like most Christians who have affairs, don't kind of set out planning, righto, this year's going to be the year, I have a bit of fun. But they find themselves in that situation and their hearts are engaged with someone else, and their hearts are hard towards their husband or their wife. And it kind of, they feel powerless. But actually, no, there was lots of little decisions you made that took you there. And this article will help you think about, okay, where am I down that path? Turn around and come back, and how can I look after my marriage and make it rich and fulfilling? Because that's God's plan, a rich and fulfilling marriage. I don't know, we often think like, oh, well, you're not allowed to have a divorce, and we think that's kind of God being mean or hard and locking you into something. It's like it's a drudgery, it's a life sentence. But have a look at what God's got here. It's a plan for our good. You see, God's plan for marriage is intimacy and faithfulness. Have a look at it with me. It's tied into the way we're created. God created the male and female from the beginning, and he made us for marriage. That's the reason that we get married, is because God made us male and female. It's part of the way we're made. So our modern movement to kind of define ourselves however we like, in terms of I'm not a man or a woman, I can be whatever I feel like, and I don't have to get married to a man or a woman, or I can have whatever arrangement of how many people and animals that I want in my marriage. Well, that's just nonsense. God created us male and female for marriage between man and woman. And he did that for our good. And the two shall become one flesh, so that they are no longer two but one. Therefore, whatever God has joined together, let man not separate. Just see the beautiful picture there of faithfulness and intimacy. The two shall become one. Okay? The two come together. I'm getting a phone call, but it's still recording. I'm just going to... Sorry about that. I wasn't sure what to do. That's never happened. So the two shall become one. It's a picture of intimacy, of friendship, of relying on each other, on being good for each other, on blessing each other. It's physical intimacy as well as emotional intimacy, and you need both. And probably sometimes women need to be reminded, that the man needs physical intimacy maybe more than you do, but men sometimes need to be reminded, look, talk to your wife. She needs that emotional intimacy more than perhaps you're comfortable with. But there's an intimacy there that's in the context of faithfulness. God wants marriages to be safe places where you know you are loved, where someone is on your side. This might be a little bit too indelicate, but Christians don't have to worry about a whole lot of things that everyone else has to worry about. You know, you marry someone and they're on your side, they're for you, they love you, they're committed to you. That's God's plan for marriage. I remember when I was a school kid, The girls from the all-girls school used to read all their girly magazines, and they'd tell us all about it. And sometimes we wanted to hear, sometimes we loved. But I remember one article about women faking orgasms, and some survey of how many women fake orgasms, and that's just incomprehensible to a Christian marriage, that you would have to pretend for the sake of someone else's ego that so that blah blah. For a Christian marriage, that's just weird. All that thing about all the one-night stands and the vulnerability and the rejection and all that, that's not God's plan for you. God's plan for you is a safe place where you can be who you are and love someone and be loved. And you grow together, you learn together, you learn how to love each other. It's a beautiful picture, a reflection of God's commitment to us, of God's character. You see, God is a God who is committed to people. You see, marriage says people matter. If it gets hard, and most marriages do get hard, because you come together all full of emotion and hype and you're young and you're giddy, and then living with people is not easy. Do you remember how much you fought with your parents? Do you remember how much you fought with your brothers and sisters? Well, why wouldn't a husband... It's people. So you might have to work hard at it. And in fact, God uses marriages for our sanctification. He shows me my flaws and my faults by having Meredith point them out. He shows me my flaws and my faults by me being not able to be the kind of husband that I'd like to be. It's like, wow, I wish I was more like that. Wow, I've messed it up again. So marriage is not easy, but it's a reflection of God's commitment that people matter. And you can't just discard them once you've finished with them. You can't use them for fun and then see you later. That's not God's plan. This little answer that Jesus gives us here is not all that's to be said about marriage and divorce, but it's just the principle. God's plan for marriage is intimacy and faithfulness. He wants a beautiful, safe, committed relationship where you can flourish and find joy. The elders a couple of years ago, working with people from our congregation who hadn't found that in their marriages because the other partner was faithless, things like that, we wrote down some things just to help people understand what the Bible does say about marriage. I've also attached that to the email that was sent out this weekend for you to have a look at if you want, because sometimes we've got to think about this a little bit more clearly, and there's some stuff there for you to read if you would like to find out what our elders think. It hasn't gone to the church and been adopted as an official policy or anything, but this is what we think about marriage as an eldership. We've been thinking about that for quite a while as we think about how to help people who, the mess of life is affecting them. Have a look at that. That's attached to this email. But let's remember, God's plan is not to discard people, not disposable people, but God cares about people and he values them, he's committed to people. And we see that in the bits that I'm not going to preach now. In the middle of chapter 10, we see Jesus brings the children up and says, see, it's kids like this. I even accept them, people who we think are not very important. And then the rich man comes and Jesus says, you think you've made it, you think you're all together, but no, you've got more to do. And the disciples are wondering about that, and Jesus says, look, it's God's work to save people. It's God's commitment to people. And then at the end of this chapter, I just want to look at how this principle of God being committed to people, God caring about people, that God cares about the people that everyone else kind of doesn't care about. The outcasts, the rejects, people that nobody else has time for, God has time for them. God loves the widow, the orphan, the oppressed, the rejected. Have a look at it. This is a beautiful illustration of God's character. It's what shapes his attitude to marriage, but it's how he relates to people. Have a look at the blind man at the end of chapter 10. Is it 46? Yeah, jump in at 46. He's coming to Jericho. There's a blind man who's a beggar. So he's sitting down somewhere off to the side of the road. I guess there's a crowd gathering. He can't see. He hears that it's Jesus and he's calling out. Have a look at it. Let me get it right. 47. Jesus, son of David, have pity on me. And they tell him, be quiet. The teacher's coming through. You just be quiet and stay in the background. It's nothing to do with you. Isn't that terrible? Shush, 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 shush. We're trying to hear the teacher. You're just a blind beggar. You don't matter. Isn't that terrible? But isn't that what we do, human beings? But all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. There's something in there that this blind man, the son of Timaeus, Bartimaeus, he recognizes that Jesus is the descendant of David. He's the coming king, right? This Bartimaeus has heard that much. And in hope he calls out, please help me, have mercy. And Jesus does. Look at verse 49, beautiful. Jesus stopped and said, call him. Tell him to come. They're all shouting, shush, shush, just be quiet. You're not important. Jesus says, tell him to come. What do you want me to do for you? I want to see. Go. Your faith has healed you. Isn't that beautiful? This is the one that nobody else had time for, and they were going to actually keep him away from Jesus. Just shush, go away. Don't waste the master's time. Just like the little kids. Shush, go away. Don't waste the master's time. But Jesus says, come. Your faith has made you well. What's really interesting too, just a little thing. I'm running out of time. No, I've got a little bit of time. Just a little thing. Jesus says, go your way. On your way. Go about your business. Off you go. But what happens? He accompanies Jesus. Just a little thing there. The best thing you can do with your life is follow Jesus. Jesus gives him all the options. Like, go and do whatever your business is. But he recognizes the best thing I can do in my life is to follow Jesus. Because he's someone who cares for me. He's someone who cares for me. The world rejects him. All the important people, all the together people say, no, don't bother. But Jesus says, come. And because you know that I'm the Messiah, your faith has made you see. Off you go. But he says, no, I want to follow you. I think that's beautiful. And I think that reflects that character of God. You see, God's attitude to marriage comes out of his character. And as we try to live that, we're reflecting his character. That people matter. That everybody is made in the image of God and people matter. You can't just reject them. You can't just abuse them. You just can't treat them badly. People matter. So there's a couple of challenges for us there to think about that, just as we think about that. I think we have to, as Christians, we have to stop measuring others by human standards. And there's lots of ways that we do it. It's kind of fairly natural, and it's kind of ingrained in our culture and our society. How much money you have, how capable you are, what you contribute. There's been cultures and societies throughout our recent history that have actually gone into that. So, for example, Nazi Germany started to measure your worth as a citizen by what you can contribute to society. So disabled people were euthanized, and they were also one of the victims of the concentration camps. So what can you contribute to our agenda? That's kind of how we measure people, isn't it? And if I'm good at sport, it's like, well, he's a great sportsman, he can be my friend, but he's useless, he can't. There's, people break themselves up into groups. The pretty people, you're pretty like us, you can be like us, because that's how we measure people's value. And it seems like, you go to a school and people break up into their value groups, and there's always kind of like the leftovers group of people that, well, nobody thinks they matter. But God does. And churches do. It's funny, isn't it? Churches, you see more people with social problems, with bad people skills, with disabilities. There's more of those in churches than any other community organisation in our nation, because this is a place where people know that they'll be cared for, they won't be rejected, and it should be like that. Churches should be like that. Our church is like that. Often you find that there's more adoptions happening in churches than in our normal community, because it's Christians who say people matter. But there's a challenge for us there. Stop measuring people by human standards. But the other side of that challenge is just for you. Stop measuring yourself by what people have told you. Some of us carry some baggage because maybe your mum was down on you all the time and, well, you're just a dumb kid, or, or what do you know, or whatever. Has anybody got that phrase that mum used to say all the time? Or maybe it was dad, or maybe it was your brothers, or maybe it was at school when, everyone, you were the one who got bullied. Those terrible things can kind of start off the voices in our own head that long after that bullying stopped, long after mum's gone, we keep telling ourselves, you'll never amount to anything. Oh, you're just the dumb kid. Whatever it is. We have to stop measuring ourselves by the things that people tell us. And when the world starts to say that Christians are evil because they have this strict and nasty approach to marriage, because they don't go for free love and they're so narrow and whatever, we have to stop listening to what the world's saying and say, no, we're like God. We value people, and I'm loved by God. So whatever voices you've got or whatever people are telling you, there's two things to remember. You are made in the image of God. Boom. Every human being has some reflection of God. Every human being has something glorious in them. Every human being is innately of value. That's why Christians are against abortion. We're against euthanasia. That's why Christians are against slavery and trafficking. That's something that Christians believe that other people let go of, and so they allow themselves to do terrible things to other people. It's like, okay, the human rights becomes a competition between the feminists and the baby. And who's going to win? Well, the one who's got the loudest voice. But Christians say, no, every human being matters. Every human being is glorious, has a breath of God in them. And the other thing to remember, when people stop judging you, to stop listening to the way other people judge you or the things other people say about you, is that Christ died for you. How much are you worth? Megan over at the childcare centre, she has a poster in one of the rooms. Maybe it's her office, maybe, I don't remember. I remember seeing a poster over there that said something, and it was quite clever. It said, Jesus thinks I'm to die for. Now I think that's an older phrase now, and it's a fairly empty phrase, to die for. Oh, it's to die for. But actually, when you put it in that context, doesn't it say a truth? What's your value? What are you worth? God the Son of David, the King who came to be Messiah and save his people, he thinks your life is worth dying for. And he has died that you might have life in him, that you might live for him now and live forever. What are you worth? Well, turn it around. What's he worth? He's worth following, isn't he? There is no one else who cares for you like he does. He would lay down his life that you might live, and that's not going to change. So, friends, I encourage you to stop thinking about people the way the world thinks about people, to see the glory, the image of God in everybody, to serve and love others like Jesus called us to, like last week and the week before, and to keep following Jesus because he is our Saviour, and his character, his plan for us is a beautiful intimacy and faithfulness with him, and intimacy and faithfulness in all our relationships, but particularly in marriage. Well, may God bless you as you think about that. Please have a look at the links down below and the article or the summary of marriage and divorce that the elders have worked on. Have a look at that, because you'll see again the character of God coming out in that and how that works out in practice. Well, may God bless you this week as you think about these difficult things, and please work hard at loving others and being faithful and developing intimacy. Let's be like God in this. God bless you.